desperate to protect her farm, the only lifeline for her and her 10-year-old granddaughter. 68-year-old Charlotte confronted the thieves stealing their harvest. Their response was brutal, leaving her bloodied on the ground as little Mercy watched in horror. As the child fell to her knees in prayer, a bone-chilling howl echoed across the suddenly darkened field. In a remote village nestled between rolling hills, life moved at a gentle pace. For 68-year-old Charlotte and her 10-year-old granddaughter Mercy, their small farm was more than just property. It was their lifeline, their only source of income since Mercy's parents had perished in a tragic accident 3 years earlier. The modest plot had been in Charlotte's family for generations. Each season brought its own challenges, but they always managed to harvest just enough to see them through until the next planting. That autumn had been particularly kind. Their crops stood tall and healthy, promising a harvest that would sustain them through the harsh winter months. Charlotte felt a rare sense of security as she admired their fields each evening, her weathered hand resting on Mercy's shoulder as the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. One crisp morning, as the first frost dusted the ground, Charlotte and Mercy set out for their daily inspection of the farm. The walk was peaceful, with Mercy running ahead, her breath visible in the cold air. But as they crested the hill overlooking their land, Charlotte stopped abruptly. Something was wrong. The neat rows of corn that had stood proudly yesterday were now partially bare. Charlotte rushed forward, her heart pounding against her ribs. Nearly half their crops had vanished overnight, harvested by unknown hands. The remaining stalks stood like silent witnesses to the theft. Charlotte fell to her knees among the empty rows, her body trembling with rage and despair. This wasn't just theft. It was potentially a death sentence with winter approaching. Mercy hugged her grandmother tightly, not fully understanding the gravity of their situation, but sensing Charlotte's distress. The old woman's eyes, usually warm and kind, now hardened with determination. They would survive this. They had to. In the days that followed, Charlotte maintained a vigilant watch over their remaining crops. She slept only a few hours at dawn, spending nights perched on their porch with an old shotgun across her lap. A week passed without incident. The remaining crops continued to mature, giving Charlotte a glimmer of hope. Perhaps they would have enough after all. Perhaps the thieves had moved on. That hope shattered one afternoon as Charlotte and Mercy headed to check on their corn. As they approached the crest of the hill that overlooked their property, unfamiliar voices carried on the wind. Charlotte motioned for Mercy to stay quiet as they cautiously peered over the ridge. 3 men were systematically cutting down their corn and loading it onto a rusted truck. They worked efficiently, like predators knowing their time was limited. Charlotte felt her blood run cold, then hot with fury. These were the thieves who had stolen their future. Mercy clutched her grandmother's worn dress, fear evident in her eyes. Charlotte hesitated, considering their options. Making her decision, Charlotte straightened her back and marched down the hill toward the intruders, with Mercy trailing nervously behind. As they approached, one of the men noticed them and nudged his companions. They paused their work but didn't flee, instead watching the elderly woman and child with mild amusement. Charlotte confronted them, her voice surprisingly steady despite her racing heart. She asked who they were and demanded to know why they were taking crops that didn't belong to them. One man, taller than the others with a scar running down his cheek, finally turned to her with a sneer. His companions laughed at this, their eyes cold and calculating as they sized up the old woman and the child. Charlotte pleaded with them, explaining that this farm fed her and her granddaughter, and that without this harvest, they would starve during the coming winter. As one man continued cutting down a stalk of corn, something in Charlotte snapped. Desperation transformed into fierce determination. She grabbed a nearby hoe and swung it at his loaded basket, sending ears of corn scattering across the ground. The farm fell silent. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. "This is all we have," Charlotte shouted, her voice echoing across the fields. The 3 men exchanged dark glances before the scarred one stepped forward. His face twisted with rage as he struck Charlotte across the face with an open palm, the force of the blow sending her sprawling to the ground. What followed was brutal. The men began kicking and stomping on the elderly woman, cursing at her interference. Mercy watched in horror as her grandmother curled into a ball, trying to protect herself from the savage attack. Blood trickled from Charlotte's mouth as she cried out in pain, her body jolting with each impact. Frozen in terror, Mercy stood rooted to the spot, tears streaming down her face. Her small body trembled as she witnessed the unthinkable violence against the person she loved most in the world. Something shifted in the child's expression, a recognition that no help was coming, that no adult would arrive to save them. With a courage beyond her years, Mercy dropped to her knees, her small hands clasped together, fingers intertwining so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She began to pray, her voice barely audible above the sounds of the attack. The child whispered pleas for help, for someone, anyone to save her beloved grandmother. The sky darkened suddenly, though no clouds had been visible moments before. The autumn sunshine dimmed as if a great shadow had passed over the land. A strange, deep rumble echoed across the fields. Not quite thunder, not quite an earthquake. The men paused their assault, looking up in confusion. From the edge of the forest that bordered the farm, movement caught their attention. A massive figure emerged from between the trees. A wolf, larger than any that should exist in nature, stood watching the scene. Its eyes gleamed with an almost supernatural intensity as it fixed its gaze on the attackers. But before any of them could act, the wolf bounded across the field with impossible speed. Its powerful legs covered the distance in seconds, lunging at the scarred man and sinking its teeth into his leg. His screams echoed across the farmland, high-pitched and desperate. Blood poured from the wound as he tried to kick the animal away. His companions fled in terror. They abandoned their truck and their stolen harvest, running blindly across the fields without looking back. The wolf released the injured man, who dragged himself away, leaving a trail of blood on the soil. The animal turned towards Charlotte and Mercy, its massive head lowered, eyes still glowing with that strange light. For a moment, Mercy feared it might attack them too. Instead, it seemed to assess them, as if making sure they were unharmed. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the wolf turned and loped back toward the forest. At the tree line, it paused for one final look back, its form silhouetted against the trees. Then it was gone, vanishing among the shadows of the ancient woodland. The villagers found the injured man trying to crawl along the road and apprehended him. His pain-induced confession led to the capture of his accomplices by nightfall. News of the miraculous wolf spread throughout the region, though no trace of the animal was ever found again. Later, village elders would whisper in amazement that there hadn't been wolves in this region for over a century. Some claimed it was Charlotte's late husband's spirit, returning to protect his family in their moment of need. Others believed it was divine intervention, an answer to the pure-hearted prayer of a child. Whatever the truth, no one dares trouble Charlotte and Mercy now. They are left in peace, their small farm surrounded by an aura of supernatural protection. And what about you? Do you believe that something or someone beyond our understanding watches over those in desperate need? Or was the wolf's appearance merely a fortunate coincidence at the exact moment when all seemed lost?